Hello, welcome to another edition of The Debate. I'm Kavit Afai. The most unpopular president in France's history, François Hollande, has made a trip to Israel and the occupied West Bank. While in Israel, whom France helped build a nuclear reactor and assisted in their nuclear weapons program in the mid-50s, Hollande told the nuclear-armed Israel it was against nuclear proliferation. The French president said economic sanctions against Iran will remain in place unless Tehran renounces nuclear arms. And while in occupied Ramallah, he called for a total halt to Israel's illegal settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territories. In this edition of The Debate, we'll discuss France's relationship with Israel and whether it has changed under Socialist President François Hollande.
Monsieur le Président, s'il vous plaît.
French President François Hollande is in the occupied Palestinian territories on the second day of his visit to the region. Hollande's visit is a reminder of a close political and military relationship between France and Israel. The trip has mainly focused on appeasing Israelis whose nerves have been in tatters since signs emerged of a possible breakthrough in talks between Iran and the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council plus Germany. Minutes after arriving in Israel's Ben Gurion airport, Hollande reassured Tel Aviv that his country will never tolerate nuclear proliferation. But it was France that gave nuclear weapons to Israel. France was Israel's main weapons supplier until 1962, when it withdrew from Algeria. In 1956, France agreed to supply Israel with enough basic elements to produce plutonium and obtain a nuclear reactor. He got a warm welcome in Israel.
Thank you. Let me introduce our guest for this edition of The Debate. Former U.S. Marine Ken O'Keefe joins us from London. We have Congressional Defense Policy Advisor Frederick Peterson III joining us from New York. Gentlemen, welcome. Frederick Peterson, let me first start with you. How do you view French President François Hollande's visit to Israel?
Well, his visit continues a policy of support for the Palestinian state that has been unbroken through a number of French heads of government, heads of state at this point. And yet he is treading a very fine line now and maintaining that almost traditional French abstention from alliance, I think, that has exasperated NATO at times and some of his allies. And I think France is very concerned with the proliferation of nuclear weapons in that part of the world and is attempting to find a way to be assured that the security interests as they and Israel perceives them.
Regarding France and Israel and the different presidents that it's had.
Well, because politics is nothing but a stage, and the players will change their script a little bit every now and then. And right now it seems useful for France to play a different role than it did for most of the last 10 years. The gentleman in New York, with all due respect, said a couple of things that deserve responding to. One, France supposedly is very supportive of the Palestinians. Well, this is absolute nonsense unless we consider shallow talk with no actual meaningful physical actions behind it substantial, and it's not. France is part of a European Union which is doing 28 billion euros a year in trade with Israel, so it can say whatever it likes about settlements being unhelpful and so on, but that's all just a bunch of rubbish. It means nothing while they continue to do 28 billion euros a year plus in trade. Also, he said that France is concerned with nuclear proliferation. Well, how is that possible? Israel, as we've seen in the report that you just did, is not having its nuclear plant inspected. It has the worst kept nuclear program, a secret in the world, with hundreds of nuclear weapons, and Israel has stated in many different ways its willingness to literally destroy the planet if it feels its security and existence is threatened. Ultimately, Israel also has a long track record of committing massive crimes against humanity and war crimes, including such things as torturing individuals, including minors, executing humanitarian aid workers in international waters, and dropping white phosphorus and using experimental weapons in Gaza. So how can we not consider Israel to be a serious threat to international security when it clearly can commit such horrendous crimes and it has a nuclear weapons program? So these things are beyond hypocrisy, and we need to see that.
Frederick Peterson.
You'd like me to respond to that?
Yes, I do.
I think what we're trying to reach on this program is a truth, and a truth not based on exaggerated, distorted statements.
So why does he feel, the French president, while he's in Ramallah, to call for a halt, but yet prior not be vociferous about this, not being more proactive in voicing this opposition?
Well, I would go one step further, but let me thank the gentleman on that end for bringing up the truth, and let me share some truth with you. The truth be told, the so-called war on terror, which my birth nation and yours instigated, is a farcical war of terrorism in which countless people have been killed, millions of refugees have been created, millions of orphans have been created, and all this based on a false pretext that Muslims were responsible for 9/11, and everything that stems from that, including the hardship that the Palestinians have had to endure for falsely being labeled as unreasonable, unpeaceful, and ultimately Jew-hating terrorists, is so destructive that it is hard to measure it. The truth be told, that Israel was founded on terrorism, whether it's Ergen and Stern Gang, the hotel in Jerusalem they bombed, the Lavon affair, the USS Liberty, in which Israel, our supposed ally, attacked a Navy ship and killed 34 American sailors in cold blood and attempted, to the best of their ability, to sink that ship and kill everyone, including hitting the life rafts which were put in the water when the ship was close to sinking. This is Israel for you. It has also committed atrocities in Sabra and Shatila. As I mentioned, it bombed people with white phosphorus and used experimental weapons in Gaza in 2008, 2009, and again in 2012. Ultimately, it is a long list of incredible crimes that have been totally unpunished because my birth nation, the United States, has protected it hand and foot, especially in the Security Council with vetoes. And this is the truth. And the truth is that the Palestinians have been dealing with this for decades, and they've been left abandoned not only by Western nations, but by the Arab nations, disgracefully so. And this is the bad reality of what the Palestinians have been dealing with. And to be neutral, falsely neutral, in this context is to be untruthful at best, to be a prostitute at worst. So I will not be neutral in this circumstance. I will very much side on the area of the truth. And the truth is that Israel is a criminal state which has committed so many crimes it can hardly be counted. We would need hours and hours to even begin to list them. And ultimately, if you want to talk about the Marine Corps, let's end with some real truth. Smedley Butler, the best Marine who ever lived, which I'm sure you know him, winner of 2 Congressional Medals of Honor, wrote a book that I recommend every single Marine alive, especially every Marine and every service member in the United States who swore to uphold the U.S. Constitution, read War is a Racket by Smedley Butler, because there's a Marine with some real integrity and honor and truth-telling ability. Well, you know, the first thing that should be said is that nothing I said is untruthful. So if truth is important, then I would expect to see some acknowledgement of the truth of what I said. The bombing of the King David Hotel, the Lavon affair, the USS Liberty, experimental weapons and white phosphorus being used on civilians in Gaza, executing humanitarian aid workers in international waters. We can go on and on and on. Yes, the Palestinians have also responded with some criminal activities, but in truth, you cannot blame the victim whose land has been stolen, whose people have been imprisoned, whose innocents have been killed, whose children have been violated, whose people have been tortured. You cannot blame the victim for lashing out in such circumstances, and the truth is that Israel was formed on the back of terrorism. It was formed in a way that was totally disrespectful of the Palestinian population. I have family members that fled in 1948. They had a choice, of course, stay and possibly die, leave and live, and many chose to leave and live. So the truth is that the hypocrisy couldn't be any more stark. The United States, and France for that matter, are in no moral position to be judging anybody. If we look truthfully at the record of violence over the last several decades, no one compares to the United States of America and Britain and Israel. Of all nations on this planet, no one comes close to the amount of violence and state-sponsored terrorism. And to this day, the United States continues to execute innocent people with drone strikes in the most cowardly of fashions in places like Pakistan and Yemen, and of course in Afghanistan. And ultimately, the United States has had its most impressive bedfellow in Britain and also in France and the European Union, protecting them all the way. The United States is not an honest broker any more than France is, and the proof of the hypocrisy is in fact what's been repeated more than once, and that is that Iran has the most heavily inspected nuclear program on the planet, an invasive program which probably feeds information to Mossad that is used to execute the scientists who work in the nuclear program. While it is being inspected in the most invasive of ways, while it is enduring sanctions, which is harming the people of Iran, Israel continues to have favored nation trading partner status and reaps massive rewards of trade between the U.S. and the European Union, and ultimately no punishment is meted out against it while it produces nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, and biological weapons, and uses many of these weapons, including experimental weapons, against civilian populations, including massive amounts of children.